A reading from the letter of Paul to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, through one man sin entered the world, and through sin death. And thus death came to all men, inasmuch as all sinned. For up to the time of the law, sin was in the world, though sin is not accounted when there is no law. But death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who did not sin, after the pattern of the trespass of Adam, who is the type of the one who was to come. But the gift is not like the transgression. For if by the transgression of the one, the many died, how much more did the grace of God and the gracious gift of the one man, Jesus Christ, overflow for the many? And the gift is not like the result of the one who sinned. For after one sin, there was the judgment that brought condemnation. But the gift, after many transgressions, brought acquittal. For if, by the transgression of the one, death came to reign through that one, how much more will those who receive the abundance of grace and of the gift of justification come to reign in life through the one, Jesus Christ? In conclusion, just as through one transgression condemnation came upon all, so through one righteous act acquittal and life came to all. For just as through the disobedience of the one man the many were made sinners, so through the obedience of the one the many will be made righteous. The word of the Lord.
Our second reading on this first Sunday of Lent is taken from the letter of Paul to the Romans. We have been reflecting on obedience to God as the path to our true identity and to the real meaning of human life. In the first reading, we saw how the tempter offered to our first parents what is seemingly a beautiful alternative to being human, which is that of being like gods. But it was a deceit, it was a lie, and it did not lead to the promise, and it even destroyed or harmed the beautiful plan of God for us human beings. And St. Paul reflects on this reality from a total perspective of the presence of sin in the world. He tells us that due to the sin of our first parents, sin has changed not only their situation, but has changed the world. In a narrative form, Genesis tells us this, how after the sin of our first parents, sin really spread. You have brothers killing one another. You have pride invading a whole city, setting up the Tower of Babel, a monument of pride against God. And we see the many wars, the many atrocities. Sin entered the world. Sin was passed on. And with sin, death. Not only physical death, but the death of the plan of God, as it were, the beautiful plan of God for us human beings. And St. Paul tells us that through the sin of the first person, death has affected the whole world. Death has affected the whole of humanity. If you stop there, we can accuse St. Paul of pessimism. But St. Paul did not end there. God will never give up in the face of temptation and sin. Thanks to Jesus Christ. Thanks to Jesus Christ, we now have the offer of justice and acquittal. Through the first parents, judgment, condemnation, and death enter the world. And we experience it in our own lives. We struggle with it as individuals. We also struggle with it as a family and as a society. But St. Paul is telling us, but through this one man, the new Adam, Jesus Christ, the offer of grace remains. And in fact, the grace of God is stronger than the sin committed by our first parents, and which is the principle of sinfulness in human history. Thanks to the power of the obedience of Jesus, the Son of God, to the Father, the disobedience of our first parents has been healed. And the obedience of Jesus is stronger than the disobedience of our first parents. So there is hope for us. We may continue experiencing the allurement of temptation. And sadly, we also fall into sin. But let us not forget, there is a Jesus Christ whose obedience will lead us to grace and will lead us to the proper relationship that God had intended for God and for us. This also tells us that as sin spreads through the failure of individuals, sin has a social impact. No sin is exclusively private. Sin always affects other people. We know that. The corruption of one person affects a whole nation. The dishonesty of one person affects a whole family. But the truth of the matter also is the goodness of one person, Jesus Christ. And your and my goodness can also affect wonderfully, in a gracious manner, other people. So let us strive to follow Jesus, not only for ourselves, but for the many other people who need healing and God's mercy.